What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Student Built Startups podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Stone, entrepreneur and recent grad from the University of Minnesota, Duluth. Now, today's episode, I'm going to be trying to share a little bit about my experience with overcoming challenges and really just how you can progress and become more proficient at something when you've never done it before, and like what that process has looked like for me personally and maybe what it could look like for you. I'm still looking for my next podcast guest. Things have been hectic the last 2 weeks, moving out of my apartment, graduation stuff, dealing with changing addresses, all that kind of jazz. So I'm going to do a couple solo episodes here and there when things get a little bit chaotic at times. But I still plan on doing interviews with other guests as often as I can and making that the primary aspect of the podcast. But to get to it, I'm going to kind of start off by sharing a little bit about what the episode is going to look like and what else I'm going to be talking about throughout this episode. So initially, I kind of want to just share my first episode with you if you haven't heard it yet, just to give you like an idea of where I started with when I was doing podcasting. Prior to my first episode, I had never really done any audio or video recording very much at all, I don't think. There've been times here and there that I've done it, but not to an extent of like a production type quality that I'm trying to make like a actual quality thing. But I'm going to share like maybe 5-10 minutes of my first episode so you can kind of see where I started, what level I was at as far as like skill and like that sort of stuff. And then I'm going to pick another episode a little bit later on, maybe around like episode 30, 40, in that range, and give you an idea of like how I had progressed from my first episode to that point, which was about 35, in between 30 and 40 interviews. That's 30 to 40 hours of talking to people over Zoom or in person, interviewing them, asking questions, doing prep, planning, and that sort of stuff. So I'm excited to see myself, how I progressed, and I'm also excited to show you that if there's something out there that you want to do and that you're thinking about doing, but you're concerned because you have never done it and you don't think you'd be very good at it, just to show that you can improve and you can do better along the way. So nonetheless, we're going to get started here, and I will start off with sharing a little bit about that first episode. All right, so my first episode of the Student Built Startups podcast was a solo episode as well. And it actually wasn't the first episode that I had recorded. I did make a pre-launch recording, which was just a couple minutes long. But I have removed that from my hosting platform since I had launched the podcast. I just wanted to put up a test episode to get myself on all these streaming platforms before the launch, so there was no delay. But we're going to call episode 1 the first episode, and I'm excited to share that with you. So when I started this podcast, I was really concerned about like how I would do with interacting with people and just putting myself out there, because I've always been more of an introverted type person. I've always been kind of shy, kind of not so interested in, I guess, going and initiating conversations. Although I loved talking to people one-on-one and doing talking about real stuff that matters, I'd say. So I thought that this podcast thing would be a good thing to give a shot at, and I would try it, see how I like it, and see what goes from there. So for me, the hardest part is actually reaching out to people and doing that sort of stuff. But I'm going to play a clip here, 5 to 10 minutes of that first episode, so you can see kind of what I was like when I first started. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Student Built Startups podcast. This is our first episode here. Thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Cameron Stone. I'm a fellow entrepreneur and a marketing analytics student at the U of M Duluth. On this show, I'll be interviewing student entrepreneurs to share their stories and business strategies. Today's episode will be a little bit different since it's our introduction. I'll be sharing exactly what you can expect from the Student Built Startups podcast and a little bit about myself. Let's get rolling. All right. Well, I'm going to start this episode off by sharing a little bit about my story as a student and an entrepreneur. I'll start with my education. So I graduated from high school in Lakeville, Minnesota in 2017, and this is kind of where my entrepreneurial ideas started to arise. So the first kind of entrepreneurial business that I ever started was I tried making my own pre-workout and selling that to some of my friends in high school. So the story behind this is kind of funny. I called this pre-workout Arm Megadon, 2 words, and I had 3 flavors. There was blue, orange, and red, which are not necessarily flavors; they're colors. But I didn't really think that through very well. And along with the weird name and the weird flavors, my basement at my parents' house looked like there was some sort of drug operation going on with all of the different powders and scales going on, and it would be kind of sketchy if you would have walked in on it and didn't know what was going on. But we'll jump into the next thing that I did as kind of an entrepreneurial thing. So also when I was in high school, I started buying and selling things on eBay, such as on Black Friday, I'd go out to the places where there was big sales and buy stuff at good prices and try to resell that on eBay and make a little bit of a profit. But what I learned is that there are a lot of fees with selling on a platform like eBay. At the time, they took like 10%, and PayPal took a cut out of it as well. And with those sort of fees and shipping, it was just really hard to make a profit on that. I did learn a little bit from that. It was kind of cool being able to learn how to list an item for sale on a platform and kind of understand that it's not as easy as it looks, I guess. All right, so now we're going to jump forward just a little bit down the road. When I started business school at the University of Minnesota Duluth in 2017, started there as just a business major and didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to major in at the school, and I just kind of started taking classes, trying to figure that out as I went. But as a sophomore, I started a clothing company called Alpine Apparel. This was my first kind of real business that I invested a good amount of money in and took seriously. I built a website through Wix and designed my own graphics for the apparel, and I kind of put a good cause behind the business. I was donating a portion of my profits back to endangered animals, and I ended up ordering the t-shirts and I sold them at a pretty good profit. I made my money back in the end. It just was something that I wasn't really passionate about. The biggest lesson that I learned from this was when you're starting a business, you can't just start it because you're interested in making money. You have to actually be passionate about what you are starting. And I just wasn't passionate about clothing and apparel and that kind of stuff. So it didn't really work out for me. And I stopped that business in order to start something else that I was a little more passionate about. And if you couldn't tell by the pre-workout thing that I tried to start when I was in high school, fitness and health and wellness has always been one of my biggest passions. And in January of 2019, I became a certified personal trainer. That's something that I've always wanted to do since I was in middle school or so. So I got the certification completed, and right after that, in January, I started a business called Shogun Athletics with my stepdad. My stepdad, Josh, also got certified as a personal trainer shortly after me. We both started this business in hopes to provide fitness and exercise advice to people who are starting their fitness journey and are kind of newer to fitness and looking for someone to help guide them. It's definitely something that I'm passionate about, and it's definitely the most in-depth that I've ever gone as far as entrepreneurship goes, and I've put in more time into this than I put into any of my other businesses. All right, so that there is about 5 minutes from my first ever recorded episode of the Student Built Startups podcast. As you can tell, I was not experienced at all in speaking and trying to have a tone of voice that was entertaining and easy to follow. I was pretty monotone. I was reading not necessarily off of a script, but I had an outline right in front of me that had every bullet point of everything that I wanted to say, which was part of the reason why I was so not fluid. I was very like by the book, just bam, 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 like I was reading off of a script. Not good. But it was a big moment for me because I had the kind of the courage or whatever to record the episode and put it out there, even though it was not good at all. I knew it sucked when I recorded it. I was not thinking, though, this is fantastic. But I said, you know what, you just got to put it out there, and someday down the road, you can kind of share this is where you started, and then where you're at 25, 30, 40, 50 episodes down the road, and have a comparison of, you know, not everybody starts off being absolutely skilled at anything they do in life. Some people naturally are talented and natural abilities, but not everybody is proficient at everything they do initially. So I made sure to put that out there because I wanted that, content to share and kind of give that perspective of, even if it's not good, you can still put it out and people will understand in a sense. So that's my first episode. Next thing I want to do is jump, I don't know, maybe in between 20 and 25, an episode in between there. I'm doing an interview, and I can share a little bit of that episode and give you some idea of where I was about midway through my journey and how I was with interviewing people. So for this episode, I chose episode 21 with Scott Miller, and he's talking about how to build your personal brand. And we're going to go ahead and play that episode right now. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Student Built Startups podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Stone, entrepreneur and marketing analytics student at UMD. I interview student entrepreneurs to share their stories and business strategies. Today's guest will speak about his crazy story and personal branding. He has a ton of experience with business and personal branding, from starting his business when he was only 14 years old and growing his business for the last 6 years, to now running workshops and educational programs around the world as a 20-year-old. He'll be sharing his story and how his education has played a role in it. I encourage you to go check out iamscottmiller.com to find out more information about him. And I'm excited to introduce you all to the owner of BOP Industries, Scott Miller. Hey, Scott, super happy to have you here on the Student Built Startups podcast. I'll have you start off by saying hello to everyone listening and sharing one crazy but true fact about yourself.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to having a chat today and sharing a couple of tips and stories. So my name's Scott Miller. I'm the 20-year-old CEO and founder of a tech education company called BOP Industries. And a crazy fact about me is that I started this company back when I was 14. But before that, I spent 3 years living in China, in Shanghai as a kid, which was lots of fun.
Oh, wow. That is really cool. How did you like China? Was it kind of weird transitioning into a different culture? Or?
Yeah, I loved it. Like, I was lucky. I went over there when I was 8 years old. So I kind of was super flexible and just kind of adapted really quickly. And it was such a fabulous experience, like getting to live in China, getting to travel all across Asia as a child. I think it's built a really awesome appreciation for Asian culture, but also to open my eyes to now I'm probably over there 6 to 8 times a year for work. And yeah, just really opened my eyes to the amazing economy that is Asia. Like, there's 3 billion people for me in Australia sitting right on my doorstep. And just the way they operate is absolutely fascinating as a economy.
Yeah, for sure. I've heard so many great things about going and immersing yourselves in other cultures. And I hear that you learn a ton of new things, and it really opens your eyes to a lot of new kind of ideas. Heard a lot of great things about that. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a really great country. Would highly recommend.
All right. Well, I'll have you share a little bit with the audience about your education and entrepreneurial story, including some details about your business, BOP Industries.
Absolutely. So BOP is a tech education company. We work with primary and high school students, predominantly teaching them about entrepreneurship, science, technology, engineering, and math, and innovation, showing them the amazing things they can do at any age from anywhere. So we get to work with big corporates around the world, like Accenture, Virgin Australia, and we've got a few exciting corporates coming on board soon that I can't quite mention yet, but cool tech companies, and showing them the amazing stuff happening in those spaces, but showing these young people how they can build their entrepreneurial skills, how they can work with technology with a focus on creativity, and do some really cool stuff even as students in primary and high school. So we deliver these programs all around the world. We started running our educational programs about 2 years ago, and in those 2 years, we've worked with over 40,000 students in over 40 locations around the world. That's across, like, I'm based here in Brisbane, Australia, but we work across Australia. We also work in China, in Singapore, Malaysia, in the US, and Germany, and get to work with some really awesome students. But it all started back as a grade 9 business project, selling keyrings at local markets as a 14-year-old.
That is an awesome story. I really like what you're doing with BOP, and it's something that I'm very passionate about, just showing young people that they can go do entrepreneurial things and being able to show them kind of how to do that and the benefits of doing that. And I really resonate with what you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. No, I definitely think like the great thing about entrepreneurship is whilst not every person's going to go on and become the next Elon Musk or Bill Gates or Steve Jobs, like entrepreneurial skills are such an important skill set to anyone for anyone to have, especially in this future of work we keep hearing about. There's skills around thinking creatively and collaboratively, working in teams, delegating roles, and being able to adapt. And whether you're running a business or whether you're a teacher, a doctor, a flight attendant, like these are all skills that you need to be able to have to not just survive, but also thrive in this future of work we're moving into.
All right. So after listening to the first 5 minutes or so of that episode, you can kind of tell with the introduction, it was a little bit more fluid. I felt a little bit more comfortable. Although it wasn't still perfect. It wasn't, I was not like eccentric with my voice. I wasn't having a dynamic range. I was still a little bit monotone, but it was definitely better than the first episode's introduction. And I know that the interview format is a little bit different from the solo format. It's a lot easier to have like a better flow during an interview and keep things a little bit more interesting with an interview. And I wasn't talking as much as I did in that first episode, but you can still tell that when I'm asking my questions and I was kind of responding to his answers and that kind of stuff, I felt more comfortable. I felt more natural. This is 20 episodes, 20 interviews later, and I had a little bit of experience under my belt. And it was now becoming like a more of a casual thing. I wasn't super nervous beforehand, still a little bit nervous to meet these people, but I wasn't so nervous about like what I was going to say, that kind of stuff. I was moving away from the script. I still had an outline of like what I wanted to cover, but I did not have like bullet points for every single thing. So that was episode 21. And thank you, Scott Miller, for coming on the podcast for that episode. I appreciate it. That was a really fun episode. But now what I want to do is I want to jump even farther down the road, maybe towards that 40, episode 40 around there. And that should be where I am the most comfortable and I have the most experience. Although I will note that I did take a short break from the podcast for a few months. So there might be a point around episode, I don't know, 30, mid 30s where I was at my peak. Because when I took a 3-month break or so for my internship, I came back and I was a little bit rusty. I'm not going to lie. And I think the episode where I came back was with Joey D, but luckily Joey D is a beast and he can really, really bring some energy to a conversation. So he made up for where I lacked for my little bit of rustiness. All right. So I'll go find an episode and we will get that one rolling. All right, so I'm not going to lie. I had a tough decision with this episode. I was trying to decide between episode 40 and episode 41, being between Hunter Bergman as my guest, and we're talking about the Yi Summit, or with Damien Fiddler, where we were in person doing our interview for the first time ever, and talking about videography. But I chose 41 because Damien Fiddler is a awesome guy, and I mean, not saying that Hunter is not an awesome guy, but we were doing the episode in person. And I think that I wanted to share, if you haven't seen the video of that episode, it is on YouTube on the Student Built Startups YouTube channel. It's episode 41. I encourage you to go look it up. Damien is a super great videographer. He set up all the cameras for the episode. We recorded it in his house, and it's a really great demonstration of the videography work that he does and he can do. And he's always improving upon his skill set that he has. So I recommend you go check out the video. And if you are interested in some videography work, reach out to him. He's a super nice guy. So I'm going to go ahead and play that episode, and then I will talk to you here in a moment. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Student Built Startups podcast. I'm your host, Cameron Stone, entrepreneur and marketing analytics student at UMD. I interview young entrepreneurs to share their stories and business strategies. Now, today's guest is going to be informing us on some of the things that you need to know going into filmmaking, as well as why it's important to build relationships with people and continue those relationships even after you complete your project working with them. Now, I am super thrilled to be introducing the owner of Northern Lens, Damien Fielder, to you guys today. What's up, Damien? How you doing?
Good.
All right. Yeah.
This feels nice.
Yeah, it does. Well, I'm going to have you start off by saying hello to everyone listening and sharing one crazy but true fact about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm Damien, founder of Northern Lens. One crazy fact about myself. I'd say being a part of the scouting community. I was in there for quite a while. I was an SPL, which is a senior patrol leader. Ended up getting my Eagle Scout as well, part of scouting. The project that I ended up doing, so you have to complete a project in order to get this Eagle Scout badge, I guess. The project that I ended up doing took 1 year to plan, coordinate, and construct. And it was a compost tumbling system for the Foley Public Schools.
Wow.
Yeah. So it took 1 year to plan, coordinate, and construct. I ended up having the Conservation Club and Troop 10. That's the troop that I'm from. They ended up working together on the entire project for the whole year. And I'd say we raised about $3 to $4 grand for this project.
Holy cow.
So yeah, it turned out really well. And I think that's just a really nice fun fact about myself. And that carries on to this videography piece too.
Yeah, definitely. That's really cool. I'm sure that gave you a lot of great experience and a good foundation on how to go forward with doing big projects like that.
Yeah.
So that's really awesome.
Exactly. And I'd say just a big part of it was just being there for the other scouts and having the opportunity to lead. And at such a young age, being able to lead others, it's kind of scary at first, I'd say. But when you're standing in front of everyone for a bit, yeah, it can be scary. But over time, I mean, you go to a couple campouts, these guys end up being like almost family, you know, and I still miss them. And I think in the future, I might go back and kind of give back in a way.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I think that's really interesting and a really great opportunity you had.
Yeah.
So you want to maybe give a little bit of background on what your education was like, and then as well as like what you have kind of been working on with kind of what's going on.
Yeah. So right at the moment, we're working on a couple projects. I have another videographer. His name's Dustin Godfrey. And he's been, that man is just so awesome. He goes out of his way to help me and doesn't ask for anything. I think he just wants experience, and he wants someone to look up to in a way. Yeah. And I think that's kind of cool as well. And he's just a great guy. As far as how everything kind of like came to be, because that's what you're wondering.
Yeah. Well,
right?
like where did your entrepreneurial journey begin? Like where did you start getting involved with entrepreneurship?
Oh yeah, sure. Where did it begin? That kind of carries on a little bit with the scouting program.
Okay.
But more specifically, it's from an individual, and he is the scoutmaster of that troop. His name's Jerry Goebel. He's from the Foley area. He's a great guy, and I always looked up to him as a kid, and I kind of wanted the same values he had, and that was leadership. It was consistency. It was planning things every single month and like providing value first for the troop. And if it didn't benefit himself, he still went out of his way to help the troop, you know, and that's kind of what leadership like is, you know. And at a young age, my entrepreneurial journey began from him, just seeing the values, the everything that he gave for the troop.
Yeah, so, that's really cool. And like what you said about leadership, like being able to kind of help others when it doesn't necessarily benefit yourself. That's really what leadership is, because you're guiding others to help them achieve their goals. And that's really what a leader position is.
Yeah. And even like I said, like not benefiting yourself, but going out of your way to like better someone like in the community or in the troop or, you know, as a filmmaker, like I want to provide value to others. And if it requires me to have long hours and whatever, like that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, they leave with a smile on their face.
Absolutely.
That's what matters.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, I'm interested about your videography business, Northern Lens. You've created wedding videos, music videos, and a myriad of like other types of videos. So I'm kind of curious kind of like what the story is behind it, where it started, and kind of what you're doing in your business now.
Yeah. So it's kind of funny that you ask that. it's not like a big crazy story. It actually just involved me trying to find a hobby, and I ended up walking into Best Buy one day, and I saw that camera section. I'm like, I've never touched a camera, but I'm gonna give it a shot, because if it turns out, it turns out. And so from there, my girlfriend at the time uh, also wanted a hobby, and I thought it'd be cool to kind of share that. So we ended up both getting cameras. And I'd say 2 weeks later, we booked a wedding.
Dang.
Like 2 weeks later, no experience, no nothing with camera equipment. I ended up spending countless hours on YouTube and just researching. I was so nervous like beforehand. And I think anyone can relate to this as a filmmaker. When you do a wedding, it's nerve wracking, like, especially for your first one, because there's just a list of certain things you got to hit, and that wedding doesn't happen again. So yeah, if you miss your shot, you miss your shot. So yeah, we ended up doing a couple weddings, and then quite a bit of weddings that ended up just carrying onward. And later in time, I kind of I wasn't growing. So that's kind of where the music videos and a little bit of corporate work, a little bit of fitness kind of came into play. Joey D, the recent artist that I ended up working with, was on your show.
Yeah, he was.
Not too long ago. Shout out to Joey D. He's a great guy. Love the kid. So we ended up spending like a day just to get all of our shots in. I'm actually quite surprised at how well that worked. We also ended up scripting and stuff beforehand. Okay. And that only took I want to say 2 to 3 hours to just plan what his video was like. And originally we wanted some longboard shots and a bunch of other things, but the weather didn't play according to plan. It actually ended up snowing that day, but it added to the video. It really did. But anyways, going from weddings to music videos, and now I'm really trying to get into the fitness industry. And that's kind of my main goal this summer, is to do as many gyms as possible, because gyms were hurting during the COVID situation. So I think just, providing value to that.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a really interesting thing you brought up. And I know, speaking of Joey D, I had him on the podcast. Great guy, really awesome vision. And the music video turned out really, really well. So that was a really cool experience. Yeah. I mean, I loved the music video. It added to the song so much. And one thing that I'm kind of curious about was, how do you go about reaching out to these companies to kind of make a video for them, like the gyms or that kind of stuff? How do you go about that? So with this episode 40, there's a few things that I can point out that are actually really interesting and kind of unique and hopefully helpful to you in some way. So this was a unique episode in the sense that it was my first in-person episode that I had done. I was doing it in another person's house, so I was in a different environment than I normally do my episodes. And also, it was my first time having a real actual video camera pointed at me while doing an interview. And there was multiple cameras, actually. So it was a completely new set of factors that are at play here. And I feel as if I handled myself pretty well. I also didn't have an outline in front of me. I kind of went off the cuff. I was pretty free-flowing. And I didn't use an outline because I had video cameras that I wanted to try and make eye contact with and make sure that I wasn't looking at my outline the entire time, because that wouldn't look very good. So it was a very different setting, and I was still able to do much better than I did on episode 21 as far as hosting an interview, interacting with somebody, and kind of fostering a conversation that is very interesting. And fun fact, this was actually the second time that we had done the interview. So we initially met up, we recorded the interview midday or whatever, and man, we got done. I'd say we got 2/3 of the way in or something, and probably 2/3, and the camera like shut off, and we're like, all right, well, we just need to kind of splice it together. We'll restart. And so we checked the audio, and Damien's audio was not recording, which, I mean, it was not a big deal at all. I mean, yeah, it was frustrating, but stuff has happened to me like that over Zoom many times. And I was like, all right, like, no biggie, like, we'll just meet up later and we'll redo it. So this was really unique because we had to do the whole 2/3 of the first part of the interview, while still trying to keep it natural. So it wasn't exactly the same, but it was a learning experience. It was a challenge. And the second time we met up later that night, did the interview, things went fantastic. The video was great. The audio was great. Although, bam, we got problem number 2 that came up. I was getting ready to do the audio editing part of it. Damien was all about doing the video editing for me, which was super nice of him to do. But I wanted to do the audio because, that was kind of my specialty. But I uploaded the audio to Audacity to do the editing, and oh my Lord, this was the first time I'd ever recorded in person. We had 2 separate microphones, and the feedback and the overlap between mics was outrageous. I probably spent like 6 to 8 hours in total of just deleting my audio from his microphone and his audio from my microphone. And some spots you could not correct it. It was just impossible because both, like, if I was talking at the same time he was talking, you couldn't just delete the audio because it would delete both people. So that made it really challenging. I did my absolute best to correct it. It turned out okay. It was reasonable. It was good enough for me to put it out there. But it was a challenge, and now I've learned. Even though I was at episode 41, I had still come across something that kind of threw me off a little bit, and I was still learning. So even though I had developed a skill set of fostering a conversation, interviewing somebody, getting them to answer questions in kind of a unique way, there's still some things that come up that are going to kind of throw you off every once in a while. And trying to look at those things as if they're not like a negative thing. It's like you're learning, you're growing, you're becoming better at this skill that you're practicing. And it's an opportunity, I guess. So those kind of things, when you come across them, you can either look at them as if they're a negative thing and like, oh man, everything was going so smooth, when I was doing it this way, but now that I tried to change things up a little bit, it got so much more challenging. Well, it's an opportunity for you to grow. That's kind of how I tried to look at it. And I tell you what, I would not redo it for the world because, I learned a lot in the process of that. And it was a really good experience. And Damien did a great job editing the video, and that turned out great. And it's probably the highest production video that I have on my YouTube channel. So that was a great episode. All in all, just took a lot of work to put into it to get things lined up properly. So we are about 33 minutes into this episode, and I give you snippets from 3 other episodes that you may have already listened to. So I'm not going to play any more prior episodes. All that I want to chat about lastly here is just how this could apply to you potentially. If there's something that you are wanting to do, something that you are curious about, give it a shot. Like, you don't have to have ever tried it before for any real sense. Like right now, I'm really interested in NFTs and the blockchain. And I said, you know what, I kind of want to create a NFT project and I want to do my own artwork. So I've been spending 2 hours a day drawing some artwork. And to be honest, I've been doing better than I thought. I've never done artwork by any means, for anything other than doodling when I was 12 years old. The last time I did art was probably an art class, but I've actually been enjoying it. So, and I've been getting better at it each time that I finish a drawing. So anything that you are wanting to do, give it a shot. You might suck, but that's pretty normal to suck at it. It takes time to get good at something. It takes time to get skillful at it. If you never played basketball before and you go to a basketball court, and there's other people there, you can't expect to go up there and just start making threes and dribbling between your legs and behind the back. Or even just simply making every shot. You're going to suck for a while and people are going to say, well, you suck. But you show up every so often consistently and do this stuff and practice, you'll eventually get much better at it. So if you want to do something, try it. If you don't like it, don't do it. But if you do like it and you suck, keep going, and you won't suck as much later on, and maybe you'll even get good at it. So that's kind of my message from this episode, and that's kind of all that I had to share. So I encourage you to head over to studentbuiltstartups.com. Check out the show notes. There's probably not much show notes on there, but there might be a little something to check out. And follow us on social media, Student Built Startups or SBS Media. And lastly, if you want to give us a follow at Young Entrepreneurs Evolution, you can follow us at ye.community. That is another project that I'm working on. I got a couple ideas that I'm going to be bringing in the heat with here soon, hopefully. And I will hopefully be back in 2 weeks from now with a episode with an interview. That's what the plan is. Alrighty, well, that is it for today, and I will see you on the next episode.